Everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage, and we're back for another edition of Thyroid Answers podcast. I have my co-host with me, as usual, Dr. Erica Riggleman. Erica, how are you today?
I'm doing good today.
Sunny, beautiful day.
Yeah, it's actually feeling like spring out.
It looks like spring, it feels like spring, and it's probably a terrible day to be cooped up and confined inside a home or some other type of containment system, right? We're in the throes of challenges with the coronavirus, and so there's a lot of people that'll get the chance that maybe you didn't get a chance to listen to Thyroid Answers podcast before, because now they need something to do. So they'll be inside, they'll be looking for something to do. Netflix, they've probably finished it. There's nothing good on TV, so they'll turn to podcasting and they'll get a chance to listen to Thyroid Answers podcast. So this could possibly be one of the best things that ever happened to the podcast.
Absolutely.
It's everybody forced to listen to podcasting content, and especially Thyroid Answers. But today we got another guest, which is fantastic. Today we have Lacey Dunn. She is she's like a fitness professional, bodybuilder, nutrition expert. She's kind of breaking the mold in that dietitian world, because when we talk about dietitians, typically they've got a set of training that they got. Same thing happens to everybody. We get a set of training, and a lot of the nutrition training we got in school, nutritionists get, dietitians get, has got this kind of platform that that we're taught, and we're kind of say this is how you maintain health. And what we've realized over the last 15, 20 years is probably the worst diet we could have ever followed. Was the stuff we followed in the 80s and the 90s, and now we're starting to wise up to it. But we're going to talk to her about hypothyroidism. We're going to talk to her about diet, nutrition, fitness, working out, kind of cover some of the myths that go along with working out, because so many people who have thyroid issues are afraid to work out because it's going to slow their physiology or it's going to make their hypothyroid worse. So without any further ado, Lacey Dunn, welcome to the Thyroid Answers podcast. How are you today?
Hello. I'm doing fabulous, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to get to chat with you and your listeners and share some value for them.
Yeah, so why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background? I did an okay job of introducing you, but they probably want to know who you are and a little bit about you and what you do and why why you should be bringing some insight into this whole thing. What's the background? How did you get into what you're doing?
Yeah, so I originally got started in regards to nutrition with trying to go into biomedical sciences. I started weight training then in order to make the University of Central Florida cheerleading team. And then I made the team. I became even more in love with weight training and nutrition. And then my grandma was diagnosed with colon cancer. And then from there, I started diving into the literature, like what could I do to help her with her colon cancer, to help her with her treatment. And then when she got to remission, help her through remission, and then help my family with prevention. And so I was just overblown by how nutrition can impact everybody's quality of life and reduce the risk of chronic disease, help in the treatment of chronic disease. So it just blew my mind, and I knew right then and there my passion was in nutrition. So since then, I have dug even more into nutritional science, continued weight training, doing bodybuilding type of competitions, but my main passion lies in functional medicine nutrition. There is just there's so much crap these days out in nutrition. There's terrible advice going out, whether that is dietitians themselves, nutritionists, personal trainers, doctors. There's so much confusion. So my goal is to help give people the tools and the knowledge they need in order to take their lives back into their own hands and to decipher through, honestly, the bullshit that's everywhere and get just straight facts.
Awesome. I know that when we talk about diet, nutrition, and you talk to a lot of people, and Erica and I have talked about this on the podcast between ourselves and with other guests, the real issue is we get very polarized when it comes to nutrition, right? Everybody picks their camp and their religion, and they kind of stick with that. And in reality, what winds up happening is we wind up circling the wagon, shooting in, attacking each other, when in reality, I think we really all believe in the same general concepts, which is eat more real food, eat less fake food, processed food, right? And if we eat more whole food, real food, the vast majority of people are going to be healthier. If we ate more food in season versus out of season, and we'd probably be a healthier population. And then we can find the little nuances from there based on each individual needs. But we have a food industry that is essentially creating or helping to create a vast majority of the healthcare problems we have in this country. And we're not paying enough attention to, hey, the problem isn't with what type of beef you eat necessarily, or whether you like vegetables or more keto. The issue is we need to reduce the processed foods, the sugars, the damaged oils, and all those things. Would you agree with that as a general?
Oh my gosh, I 100% agree. It's not just about education, it's also about food availability.
Yeah.
Right.
And I also think that even in the fitness realm, there's even more disconnect in the food stuff, because, you know, if you're doing a body competition or you're just trying to weight train or just having better health, you go online and you often see that, you know, you need to be eating, you know, just chicken and rice, and it's you got to get your macros, and oftentimes they don't really care what those macros are. You know, you could eat, you know, a little Debbie, and you could eat cakes and cookies, and as long as you're getting your macros in and your calories in, you know, sometimes some of the sickest people that I see are people who are, you know, in the fitness realm, just because there's so many nutritional disconnects going on. And
Yes.
honestly, it's the education portion.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, because I think a lot of people get confused that being into fitness, doing fitness physique competitions, having physique goals, that's health. You know, they think, oh, I'll get to that, that's healthy. No. When I'm looking at fitness and bodybuilding type of competitions and all, they're complete opposite goals. Health and fitness, yes, they can go together, but many times they're complete opposite goals.
And we see that across the board in all sports, right? I mean, as a person who I wrestled in my high school and college days, and when you're wrestling, you look at a wrestler, and for the most part, you look at somebody who's built, pretty lean, cut, you think that person's pretty healthy. But what the heck we had to do in the week leading up to that wrestling match was totally, totally unhealthy, right? Lose 20, 25 pounds that week before the match just so you could make the weight. And then you're so ravaged that you are putting anything. Yes, Erica, I ate the whole box of Little Debbie's after I would weigh in, because I was just starving and famished, and I just needed to get sugar and energy back into the system. So really, really healthy. We look at endurance athletes. This is one of the things that happened to me is we overtrain. We don't get enough rest. We may have a good diet, but we're pushing heavy on one aspect, and we're missing the recovery phase. And you look at endurance, and they're like, oh, that person runs, they work out, they must be healthy. Meanwhile, that person's struggling with IBS and anxiety and depression because they truly aren't healthy. They can look, they have the facade of looking good, but it's really not a healthy person on the inside. So looks don't always give us the right picture of what's happening within somebody.
No, and there's so much that it can impact somebody's overall health, right? Just because they're eating well doesn't mean they're properly digesting and absorbing the nutrients that they're eating.
Right, exactly. So it's really important to talk. We're talking about thyroid issues in the podcast quite a bit. And one of the things that's really important for people who have hypothyroidism is, from our standpoint, both Eric and I, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is physical activity, exercise, the habit of exercising and training is critically important to health and well-being. There is a lot of fear from people who have hypothyroidism that, hey, I'm already have slow metabolism, I shouldn't exercise, it's going to be bad for me, it's going to make me worse, it's going to make my thyroid physiology worse. Can you talk a little bit about exercise, whether it's strength training, cardiovascular, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding strength training when it comes towards, or exercising when it comes to hypothyroidism?
Yeah, of course. So I first want to say that in regards to exercise, it's all going to be person by person dependent based on what threshold each person can handle, right? So everybody has their own history, what's going on in their day-to-day life, why they have hypothyroidism. So I think the first struggle is they put themselves into a box and they say, oh, because I'm hypothyroid, I can't do any high intensity cardio or high intensity training, or because I have PCOS, I can't do any high intensity training. So the first thing you need to do is get yourself out of a box because you are not a box, you are not a criteria. You need to figure out what is your root cause of your hypothyroidism, what is going on with you, what does your overall health look like, because that is the first key. Now, when it comes to overall workouts, I'm a huge fan of weight training. I'm not a fan of weight training to the point where you are grinding yourself into the ground. So you have to make sure with weight training that what you're doing, you are properly recovering from. Your weight training should be hard. It should provide progressive overload in order to progress in your movements, create that muscle building that you want or you're striving to have. But you want to make sure you have proper recovery, because if you do not recover, you will not grow that muscle, you will not get the benefits out of the training, and you will cycle back into inflammation, oxidative stress, more harm than good. So that's with weight training. I like to suggest people listen to your body. Many people, biofeedback is things that they struggle with. So look at your sleep, your digestion, your overall stress levels. How do you feel on a day-to-day basis? Do you get more anxious? Do you have bouts of depression? How is your blood sugar? You have to pay attention to all this biofeedback, because that's what is going to tell you what your threshold for working out is like. I know a lot of people with hypothyroidism, they struggle with adrenal issues, right? So we have a lot of high cortisol, all the way to low cortisol if you're getting into that stage 3. And so the most important thing with that is knowing where you're at with your cortisol, testing, not just guessing, because I see a lot of people too think that, oh, they're struggling with cortisol issues, and they may not even have cortisol issues. But I do like to say, if you have cortisol issues, the best thing that you could do with high cortisol is stay away from high intensity training. Focus on low impact, restoration, parasympathetic work. I see my clients thrive on shifting from that, because if you are in a conscious vicious cycle of just that cortisol output, you're going to get to a point to where your health is just going to tank even further. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we have to, all good points. And I think one of the big things for people who have hypothyroidism, and you kind of alluded to this, is, if you're a person who's struggling with hypothyroid symptoms, and you've got, whether you have cellular hypothyroidism or you have glandular hypothyroidism, your cells and your tissues are perceiving some type of threat signal. So we don't want you to be doing exhaustive exercise and having poor recovery. But there's plenty of science and literature and research that shows that exercise creates so many benefits, supports gut function and gut flora and proper bacterial development. It supports and helps us with our sleep, which is often compromised in people who are struggling with chronic stress syndrome. So strength training, key, as Lacey said, you don't have to do, you don't have to be pushing yourself in exhaustion, but the key is you got to start where you can. Start with small increments of activity and exercise, work your big muscle groups, work them to a point not of exhaustion and fatigue, but work them to a point where you can feel that you've fatigued yourself a bit, but you don't have to go into that phase where you're totally broken down and exhausted. And then allow yourself plenty of recovery. For a lot of my patients that have thyroid issues, one of the things I'd like to do for them in the beginning is just get them involved in maybe some slow fitness, which is a lighter weight, very slow movements, short time exercise time. They still get change in their musculature. There's not massive amounts of, from an injury perspective, the weights are light, they're moving weights really slow, hard to get injured, and that seems to do really well, and then they can expand from there. So, but I think it's critical that they start to engage in some type of muscle activity, because muscle function and the growth of muscle tissues is key to long-term health and improvement. So I think that's not something people should be afraid of, but you probably don't want to go to the local CrossFit gym and get in a competition with the person next to you if you're struggling with hypothyroidism. Or if you are the person who has hypothyroidism and you're in that environment already and you're not feeling better, you have to do like a reality check and say, hey, maybe this exhaustive workout that I'm doing on an ongoing basis is actually part of my stress. This is maybe part of my problem. I'm not allowing for recovery. I think the competition idea of CrossFit's a neat idea. The problem is I think it also can get people to have abnormal form, go beyond their abilities and really create some issues.
Yeah, I would say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, pushing yourself too far and knowing your limit is going to be really, really important, because there is such a benefit to moving. We don't want patients to be sedentary. But so many of my patients come to me and they've been to their endocrinologist or MD, and, you know, they tell them, you know, your labs look great. All you need to do is you just need to eat less and exercise more to get the weight off. And, you know, then I see patients pushing themselves beyond the point where that becomes a huge stressor, which then is having a feedback loop that is contributing to their issues, and to a point of, you know, also women are afraid of weightlifting sometimes because they're afraid they're going to look masculine, and I know that's becoming less and less now, but, you know, there is a stigma behind that, with some people just afraid they're going to look bulky. And that is a complete myth, where women are not going to look like men if they start weightlifting. And often the people who go out and run, they're more wasting their muscle than they are building their muscle. And that muscle is really, really important.
Yeah, if you look at the body type of a sprinter versus an endurance athlete, it's night and day, versus the toned, built, full muscles versus the depleted, shrunken look on a body. And I do want to go back to the weight training aspect. Weight training, the reason I love it, it's not because I personally just love weights and I love bodybuilding. No, the reason I love weight training, specifically for people with hypothyroidism or any blood sugar dysregulation, is because it helps improve insulin sensitivity. We have these GLUT4 translocators that, with weight training, post weight training, they don't need insulin in order to bring that glucose into the cell. So right there is an amazing opportunity with weight training to help improve your insulin sensitivity. And we know high insulin levels are going to block your thyroid hormone from actually being able to be utilized by the cell. So weight training is going to be your best friend, but not overdoing it. Listening to your body, that is the crucial component.
So I like the fact that you brought up the sprinting versus the distance stuff. And as a endurance athlete myself, and doing a lot of distance running, I will tell the listeners that while I'm a distance runner, and it was the thing that probably led to my hypothyroidism, my Hashimoto's, because when we do cardio, like we'll put that in air quotes, cardio, right? And we're doing running, what typically happens is that people think that if they do some cardio, running on the treadmill or going for a run, that's going to be the most effective way to burn fat, lose weight. The challenge is, and Lacey, you can kind of add into this once I finish the comment, is when you do long sustained cardio at a heart rate that's faster than you can efficiently burn fat, you enter into this phase called the black hole zone, right? And this is the phase where I can't burn fat, I need sugar, I go through that quickly, and really it is a phase where you wind up that 60 minutes of kind of too fast of a pace, you wind up actually contributing to creating more stress and decreasing your body's ability to burn fat in the long run. What I see happening to people who are doing cardio is they're on the treadmill, they're on the bike, or they're going out for a run, and they're running or exercising for an extended duration at a pace that they should not even be at. They just don't have the efficiency to burn fat at that rate. They're creating more stress on the cells and on the tissues by going for that duration. As an endurance athlete, I didn't realize that when I was training. I was just running at a pace that felt good, but that training in that black hole zone for days, weeks, months, years, and not realizing my heart rate was too high, wasn't efficient at burning fat at that level, wound up leading me to gaining more belly fat, to becoming insulin resistant, developing autoimmune conditions. And so if you're going to do cardio, and I think cardio is a great thing to do, the reality is when you strength train, you're doing cardio. When you're any type of exercise, you're doing cardio. You're training the whole system, especially when you're doing muscle-based exercises. You're training the cardiovascular system because you still have to pump blood through the system. But when you're doing what we call cardio, running, biking, going on the treadmill, elliptical, whatever it is, my thought process is if it's a short, intense bout Tabata, hit cycle, don't worry about the heart rate. Just go as intense as you can for a very short duration of time. If you're going to train duration-wise or for an extended duration, If it's greater than that 20 minutes, get your heart rate monitor out. 180 to 170 minus your age. That's your kind of, if you want a simple kind of range to be, that's kind of your best aerobic range to burn fat. You want to stay within that range. If you are training for a 5K, a 10K, or some type of endurance race, you have to do that type of training, but you want to do it smart and you want to do it right. If you are training your body just to be optimally healthy, doing a lot more sprint type or intense type of activity can go a long way to get you healthier faster, less demand on the body, still creating a positive effect on the body, but you're not in that exhaustive phase for extended periods of time. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I find in regards to the type of cardio people are doing and the length of the cardio is very much person by person dependent, what people can handle based on things like how much type 1 versus type 2 muscle fibers that they have. What do they like? What do they enjoy? How are they doing it? Because every person is going to respond differently. But I'm so with you in regards to that long endurance cardio. I just find people are dipping into that liver glycogen, then dipping into that muscle glycogen, and they are just rolling and cycling through and not actually burning fat. They're more kicking up their catecholamines, their adrenaline, and they're just creating more havoc on their body than needed.
Yeah, I mean, we've got what, four hormones that'll raise blood sugar. We got one to drop it, right? And so when you're in a state where you need to be in a more aerobic state to really burn fat efficiently. If you're training above that heart rate, your heart rate, and Lacey's exactly right, it's dependent on you. You go running with your friend, that may be the right pace for them, but it may be totally the wrong pace for you. But to be fat efficient, which is why most people, fat burning efficient, which is why most people are exercising or going for a run or doing those things, the reason they're doing it anyway is to try and burn fat. If you're training at a rate above your effective aerobic range, your effective fat burning range, you're actually doing the opposite thing you want to do. You're creating more stress, you're increasing more sugar, you're breaking more tissue down in an effort to try and maintain that sugar, that fuel. If you slowed that pace down, if you're going to be an extended duration exercise, if you're going to do long cardio, if you slow the pace down, you get into that optimal fat burning zone, you're going to be more efficient over time. Your pace will increase in time. You'll get more efficient. But for most people who are trying to get started with it, my advice to most of them is slow down, get your watch out, get your heart rate monitor out, find your range, and work within that range. Even if you're like, hey, I can only walk to stay in that range. Yep, that's where you start. If you're going to be 20 minutes or greater, that's where you start. If you're going to be intense, do 2 minutes at Tabata, do 4 minutes at Tabata, do a HIIT cycle. That's intensity. I don't care. At that point, we just want you to have all out intensity. But if you're going to do long stuff, don't go to the gym, get on the treadmill for 60 minutes, watch TV, not pay attention to your heart rate, and then be frustrated why, hey, I'm exhausted, I'm putting on more belly fat, I got this muffin top I can't get rid of. You're just training inappropriately. And if there's anything to be worried about, if you have hypothyroidism and you're scared about training, that's where you should be the most concerned.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, I 100% agree. I think that there's that kind of fine line, and I think that your heart rate is a great way to kind of judge that, because some, like Eric said, some people walking, their heart rate gets above that range that they should, and then other people never even get in where they think that they're putting in effort. They're not even getting into a range that's optimal for them. There's that sweet spot where you're really getting all those benefits from it. And I have some elderly patients that come in that I work with that also just, they go to the gym and they like, yeah, I work out 7 days a week. I go to the gym and I walk for 60 minutes and watch TV, and their heart rates, they never get their heart rate up. Yes, it's great you're moving, but think that there's that key range that you need to get in. So I think heart rate's a great way to monitor that. Also, when you're talking about pushing people beyond that limit and knowing that limit, what are some of the signs and symptoms that you see with people that they can be on the lookout if they think that they're overtraining, so they can be aware of those?
Yeah, anything in regards to heightened anxiety, blood sugar crashes, trouble sleeping, any alterations and poor digestion. mood swings, any changes in your menstrual cycle, whether it comes late or early, or you have mid-cycle spotting. Those are things that I like to look at. Oh, and of course, fatigue and increased delayed muscle soreness. Those
I
would be
think a
the
lot of people think that if they don't get sore, they didn't get a good workout. And I think that that's, that's great if you get sore, but I don't think you should be getting sore after every single workout.
No, and being able to not be sore is a great sign that you're able to recover properly. You don't want to be crippled. You don't want to be like, oh my God, I'm sore like 3 days later. That's not a good sign.
Mhm.
I think that was an old kind of mentality, right? It was, hey, if you don't have,
Still there, apparently.
right, if you can't, if you get done doing your chest workout or your arm workout, and tomorrow you don't have any problems moving your arms or your chest, you probably didn't work out hard enough. And I think we're seeing that, hey, we don't need to break the body down that far to get strength gains, right? We can be efficient, we can train the muscle tissue, we can be efficient without creating more stress, more damage to the tissues.
Now, I have a question.
Yeah,
Have
go
you
ahead.
guys heard of the Whoop?
Am I a fan of it?
Have you heard of the Whoop? Yes.
I have. Yeah, I've heard of the Whoop. I've Whoop, Aura Ring. I have a BioStrap. So that's one of those things that I think is really any type of device that you can look at that's going to give you some feedback, some biofeedback as to where you are. I think those things are beneficial. They all have, I think, varying. I don't think they're all on the same platform, right? There's some variability of how good some of these things are, whether you have a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, an Aura Ring, a BioStrap, a Whoop, and there's going to be more of these things coming out. But I think it's like going to one of these big stores and looking at all the TVs on the wall, and you go, man, that one's a little bit better, or is that one a little bit better? Look, the one you have is the best one, right? That's my opinion on a lot of these things. If you're going to
actually use,
use what you're going to lose, because if you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch that gives you some indicator of your heart rate, your heart rate variability, sleep cycles, and that's all you have, that's fantastic, because it gives you a steady kind of criteria to take a look at. Is there something better? Absolutely. If I buy a TV at the store today, I guarantee you there's a better one tomorrow. There's always going to be something better. But I think for those that are going to use a device like that, it can be really, really helpful. And since you brought it up, it's probably a good thing for you to kind of talk about. And maybe that's where when you talk about test yourself before you wreck yourself, maybe you're headed in that direction with that type of question. Is that where you're headed?
Yeah, I would say there's so much power in potentially using heart rate variability for being able to be more aware of how you can continue on a training regimen and what adjustments in your training regimen could benefit you. I have not looked necessarily into heart rate variability in regards to like the specific accuracy, but I think it's up and coming, and especially for hypothyroid patients and ones that are, I would say, crippled by adrenal distress. It could be a huge game changer for somebody.
Yeah, and there's a ton of apps out there that you can do with the heart rate variability. I know I have one. I think it's called HRV Elite that will tell you first thing in the morning whether you're in sympathetic or parasympathetic. It kind of gives you like a dial, and it says, if you're in the green, you should be good to train today. And if you're way off in the other range, maybe you didn't sleep very good, maybe you're not recovering, it's probably not a good idea to push yourself that day. So there's data I think is so important, whether it's heart rate or even checking your blood sugar or tracking your sleep. It's all data that helps you, tweak things so you can more optimize your workouts and optimize your health.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see more people use it.
Yeah, I think, and for the people who don't know what we're talking about heart rate variability. It's not the same necessarily as your heart rate. Your heart rate variability gives you an indication of how adaptable you are to everyday life, the stresses of life. Your heartbeat is and your heart rate is kind of all over the place when you're healthy. It's got a lot of variability to it. When your heartbeat or heart rate is very consistent, that kind of shows you have decreased metabolic flexibility. So what we want to do is when we have different types of stress and strain on the body, we want to be able to increase and decrease our heart rate to be able to adapt. And so the healthier you are, the more variability you have. So now we have these devices that can measure our heart rate variability and tell us, are we in a sympathetic fight or flight dominant state, or are we in more of a parasympathetic dominant state and more in a rest and recovery state? And we really need a balance between those two things. The nice thing about heart rate variability is you can get a device that measures your heart rate variability, and you can get a pretty good idea of how well you recovered from yesterday, right? Is today the day? And when Lacey's saying, hey, test yourself before you wreck yourself, that's what I do every morning. Is I pull out my phone, it's synced with my BioStrap, and I look at my heart rate variability and my the number they give you, like your recovery number, and I can say, hey, I'm down to about a 30 on my HRV instead of being in the high 60s or 70s where I typically am. Even though I still have the habit of exercise that's just become disciplined into my life, I know that that's not the day to go beat myself up, do a lot of extra things, because I'm not recovered. I'm more likely to get sick. If you're a person who has hypothyroidism and you want to exercise, looking at your HRV is a great tool, because you can look at, hey, I exercised yesterday, but I didn't recover well. My HRV is lower today than it was yesterday. So instead of going for maybe a strength workout, I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to do something that's really going to help me recover, versus doing something, even though it's well-intended activity, may break me down. Would you agree with that, Lacey?
Yeah, I would agree. And I do want to mention, just because I have so many patients that, because of their hypothyroidism and all that they've gone through, they're at wit's end and they try and hold on to like every single thing that they can control. And sometimes that causes even more stress than good. So stress, it can be physical, emotional, spiritual, environmental. There's so many stressors, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to implement these strategies and then have that be another stress on you. Like always looking at your fitness tracker, being like, oh, I got to check this heart rate, or, oh, I got to be at this number of steps. You don't want to do that. So I just wanted to make that clear, because I have seen that happen for some people. And then that just creates even more stress on the body and disordered body image and potentially disordered eating habits.
Yeah, and that's a prime example. I just had a patient yesterday who's, she's eating Burger King and Taco Bell and fast food, like all she eats right now. And so I was telling her we were going to have to work on changing her diet. And that seemed very overwhelming to her. And she's already in a very stressed, wired kind of state. And I was like, look, there's going to be a fine line as we move forward, that we're going to have to try to move you in a direction of eating better, but we also can't have that be the thing that's then going to make you sicker by stressing you out more.
Yes.
If that's going to be the one thing that's like, oh my gosh, I can't eat this and I can't eat that, and oh, that's making me more stressed. You should have just keep eating the fast food at that point, because that was less stressful on you. So you're just trading one stress for another. So I think the exercise is the same thing. And with the data points, it's about moving in baby steps and moving you in the right direction, as opposed to just, always being in that optimal state. Even, us who work on all of our health, I'm sure there's days that, like Eric said, that it's like, okay, I'm not in a range, I'm not fully recovered, whether that was extra stress from the office or, things that are happening in the media, who knows? Our lives are stressful, and we just have to accommodate and accept, okay, today I'm going to do this instead of that, so that I don't keep, pushing myself into the ground.
Yeah, that's very important.
Everything can be a stressor, right? Everything, especially, and the reality is a lot of it is self-inflicted, right? How you think about something, what you focus on, how you perceive the environment, what things we're doing. So for the person who's already on edge and concerned about every aspect and they have a lot of fear going on about a lot of things, this may not be a fantastic tool for them. Or it could be a great tool that you can look at and say, you're concerned about everything. You had that food yesterday, or you did that yesterday, and yet look, your heart rate variability is actually doing better. It's really, that's like when we're all taking care of people, we get that from our experience. We get the sense of the person who we have to say, this is not the person to push those things on. This is a person we got to make it life super, super easy, because they're already over the edge with stress, fear, and anxiety. We got to slow things down for them. But for the people who aren't that way, or aren't in that fear mode and are looking for a good tool, heart rate variability is is a fantastic tool to use. But again, we have to we got to look at each individual when they come to us with hypothyroidism, when they come with us to us deconditioned, when they're coming to look for a new diet, new nutrition, change their body. Everybody's an individual. We have to stop treating, as Lacey said right in the beginning, the box, the diagnosis, the disorder, and start looking at, okay, why is the person in front of me presenting this way, and what's the best strategy for them to help them?
Yeah.
So, Lacey, let me ask you another question. When you have somebody that comes to you for help and you know that they have a thyroid condition, how do you help guide them to what is going to be the best exercise for them? Are there keys or there clues that what's the best exercise? How do you direct where they need to start? Should they start with strength training? Should they start with yoga, Pilates, some form of cardiovascular? Should they start with just meditation? How do you help understand where they should start, and then give them some of the what guideline or what tools do you give them to know that, hey, what I'm doing isn't probably appropriate or right for me in this moment?
Yeah, the first thing I want to know is what does your thyroid look like? What does your overall health look like? Your whole HPA axis. I look at a variety of symptoms. If they are cleared to do any exercise that they can, then my next question is, what do you like to do that you enjoy? Because if you enjoy something, then you can give proper effort to do it. So that's the second thing that I do. The third thing I do is I create a overall program based on what they like and what they want, as well as what I think will be best for them. And I provide it to them. And then we say, okay, let's take a week on this program. Let's see how you do based on how you feel with sleep, digestion, stress levels, cortisol or blood sugar regulation throughout the day. After a week, let's change it up if we need to. Let's adjust things. Because to me, I don't care if somebody can do a specific program. I care if that program is going to be helpful for their overall health and getting them to a place to where they're going to feel better, not worse.
So here's the common thing I hear from people. It'd be interesting to get your response to it. And people say, I don't like exercising, therefore I don't want to do it.
Yes.
Where do you ever get that commentary, and then how do you respond to that?
Yes, I do get that commentary. I get also, I want to do the seafood diet. I see food and I eat it.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing I ask is, I ask, why are you coming to me? What are your goals? What is your why? Where do you want to be in the next 1 year, 5 years? Help me help you. So then I'm like, okay, well, if you don't want to exercise, what can we do on a day-to-day basis to help increase your activity level? Is that playing with your kids? Is that going on a walk on your lunch break? Is that walking or playing with your dogs? What can we do that may not be a specific exercise, but what can we do that will keep you active on a day-to-day basis? And why are you doing that? Instill that in your brain, because that why is what is going to push you past just motivation and through dedication through that habit change.
Absolutely. And sometimes you have to get very creative with activities, whether that's gardening or
Cleaning.
Cleaning. I mean, whatever it is, I mean, you have to sometimes get creative with these people so they don't realize that they're exercising, but they are exercising.
Yeah, before we know it, guys, these gyms are going to be closed, and with the coronavirus, and then we're all going to be vacuuming and cleaning and lifting cans.
Yeah, so I'll give you the next one that people often say is, I'm just not motivated. And I think that ties into what you'd say, but if somebody says, I'm not motivated to do that, now what's the response?
My response is, first, how are you sleeping? How are your energy levels? What's your day-to-day stressors like? Because, of course, if you are overdoing things, you're not sleeping correctly, you're not eating correctly, you're not going to be motivated. You're going to be tired. You're going to just want to flop on the couch. I know my family members have been that way. You know, they work, and work with kids all day long, and then they're not motivated to do anything. Like, I totally understand that. And sometimes not being motivated is a sign of things going like chaotic in your life and chaos in your hormones and your health. But other times, not being motivated is just kind of not having your why set out, like not knowing that your health is what matters. And maybe that health is not your current priority. And then it's asking, okay, well, why is it not your priority?
And I would add to that is that there are days, even though I know all three of us enjoy working out and exercising, there are days that I guarantee there's days I'm not motivated. This morning it was a pretty good rain this morning at 5:45 when I headed out to go for a run, but today is run day. So was I motivated to go out in the rain and run? No. But I think what happened, what needs to happen for a lot of people in the beginning, especially if you haven't been doing activity or exercise or changing your diet, right? None of those things are motivating because they're taking you out of what your normal routine is. And so I think what can be most effective and helpful is just build the habit and the discipline to do the habit. You need to create a new habit. In the beginning, it doesn't necessarily feel good. You can chunk it down to 1 minute of activity or exercise and then go to 2 and then go to 3 and then go to 4 and just build that process up. But I would tell most people who say they're not motivated, you don't really need the motivation. You need the why, a purpose, right? And then you just need the habit and the discipline. And many times, even when you are not motivated, which I'm sure there's both days for both of you guys when you're not motivated to go lift or to go exercise, you wind up doing it and then feeling better as the result. And I for the most part, when you get done, you go, man, I wasn't motivated to do it, but I actually do. I'm glad I went and did it. Right.
Yeah. I tell my clients, if you are not motivated, have something in your mind, like a treat for yourself. I'm not saying food, but have something that you can look forward to after you get that exercise done, whether that's a little bit of Netflix, a bubble bath, something that can be a reward for getting that exercise in, even when you didn't want to get it done.
Yeah, I think in food is no different than the exercise too. There's some days where you don't want to eat healthy. You see somebody eating pizza, or you see somebody over there eating a brownie, and you're like, I've got to eat this. And if you don't know that why behind it, and you don't understand the nutritional why, oftentimes we tell people, yeah, you've got to get rid of the processed food. And if they don't understand the why they have to get rid of it, there isn't going to be motivation. But when you start to explain to people what those toxins do to your body, then they become passionate. Then they want to avoid it. And then they're telling other people why they should be avoiding it. And that becomes their why. So I think that food is no different than the exercise as well.
Yeah, I think you guys both explain, one of the biggest things is motivation lasts like this, right? Typically, you go to a seminar, you're motivated, you come home, it's over. Having a purpose, having a reason why, and then having creating a habit and the discipline to stay with the habit, that beats motivation almost any day. So that is having the why, like especially for those who are struggling with thyroid issues. Why should you be exercising? Why are you getting out there to exercise? Because in the long run, exercise is critical to health and well-being in the long run. One more question that I want to ask you, Lacey, because I guarantee you get this one. You talked about adrenals. Somebody's might say to you, listen, I'm exhausted. I'm already tired. And why would I exercise if I'm already tired? Can you talk maybe just a little bit about how exercise may actually help support the sleep cycle, why it may actually make you feel less tired, less exhausted, if you do it appropriately, right? Not exhaustive exercise, how exercise can actually increase sleep?
Yeah, so exercise, we increase natural endorphins post-exercise, and that can help with your energy levels, your mood stabilization, and it also improves the amount of melatonin that you naturally produce in your pineal gland in your brain, allowing you to have better sleep. And then that results in potentially better serotonin production, making you feel better with happiness, mood. So there's a lot of things that exercise you can benefit from. And if you're tired, like I get it, it's exhausting. I've had hypothyroidism. I know how crippling it can be. But sometimes when it comes down to hypothyroidism, you just have to push through a little bit of the fatigue in order to get those benefits, because you won't get them unless you at least try and get some of that movement in.
Absolutely. And so for people, the other key pieces, Lacey talked about the melatonin, which is one of those things that helps us. Like that's the signal that as your melatonin levels rise, that's the signal that tells your brain it's time to go to sleep. So if you're struggling to get to sleep at night, as your melatonin levels rise, that tells your brain, hey, it's time to go to sleep. When your melatonin levels get really low, it signals your brain it's time to get up. Okay, so melatonin production is really key. And then the other thing that I'll add to that is when we are exercising, we make the primary fuel of the body is this stuff called ATP. It's our energy currency. And when we're exercising, we break that ATP down to generate the muscle movements or the relaxation of the muscles of the muscle tissue. But as that ATP breaks down, it creates a protein or a hormone called adenosine. And that adenosine is a molecule that helps drive sleep and keep us asleep. So melatonin helps get us to sleep, tells us when it's time to get up, but adenosine is the thing that really helps support the extended periods of sleep. And it is one of those things that, if you think about it, if you go outside and you work outside in the winter where it's cold and you're doing a lot of work, that's usually like the day that you can have the best sleep of your life, because you've burned up so much ATP and you've produced all this adenosine. So as your adenosine levels rise, it's going to help you sleep better. So as you increase your exercise, you increase your melatonin, you increase your adenosine, that helps you get to sleep, that helps you stay asleep, and that improves your sleep cycle. So while you are exhausted, when you're in that exhaustion cycle, it seems almost contradictory to say, hey, go start doing some exercise because I'm already exhausted. We're not asking you to go do 2 hours of training. What we're saying is just start where you can start. Start with one, even if it's 1 minute or 2 minutes, just get in the habit, start doing it. You'll start to support the hormones that are actually going to support getting to sleep and staying asleep. And so that can improve your sleep cycle. If you improve the sleep cycle, then you've got a better ability to wake up rested, recovered, and now you're like, okay, now I can do 5 minutes. Now I can do 10 minutes. So you got to start where you are, but there's huge benefits to starting to do some level of exercise wherever you can start.
I agree.
Everybody on board with that?
Yep.
100%. Well said.
So let me ask you this. You have somebody who is got hypothyroidism, and I know this is like a big, broad question, and there's lots of different paths that somebody could go down, but somebody's got hypothyroidism, they've been diagnosed, they want to get back into exercise, you're doing nutrition, you're talking to them about exercise, but what is your general dietary principles that you give somebody to follow if they're starting to get into training, whether it's cardio, whether it's strength training, or just a combination of those things? What are some of those things that you recommend they do to optimize their outcome?
Yeah, with hypothyroidism, the first thing I want to do is remove their food sensitivity. So doing an in-depth questionnaire. I want to make sure they're getting adequate micronutrients and macronutrients. I personally do have my clients, for the most part, do macronutrients. That's just personally what my clientele want to do. But I tend to, for a hypothyroid patient, give a higher fat, moderate carb, moderate protein approach. So I try and keep protein around 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram. And then I want to make sure they are getting adequate fat. Something like 50 up to 80 grams of fat is typical for like a 130 to 150 pound woman. And then carbs fill up the rest of their calories. And I go based off of calories based on what they've currently been doing, and then what their potential maintenance calories could potentially be with their change in exercise. With their exercise, I want to start people off low. I don't want to start them on something that's going to be any high intensity, crazy work, because I want to make sure that this is something that their body can recover from and it's going to be beneficial for them. So I like starting people off 3 to 4 days of weight training, from 4 to 6 sets of an exercise, for 5 to 6, that's 5 to 6 exercises, 3 to 4 sets of each exercise, just providing them with exercise will allow them to adapt, but also recover. And then I incorporate nothing high intensity, just moderate or steady state cardio to start 2 to 3 times a week. So I want to start slow. I want to test and see what they can handle. And then I want to go from there.
So when you're working with, are the vast majority of your clients, are these people that are trying to get into more of a physique or fitness type competition,
Not with
or are you working with
hypothyroidism.
all aspects of all aspects of people?
I work with a huge variety of people, from people who have had a history of infertility, PCOS, hysterectomies, all the way to men who are dealing with aromatase enzyme falters and post anabolics, or all the way to people who have H. pylori, Candida, SIBO. So I work with a variety of different people, and that's why I'm all about individuality. One person is not going to get the same program, whether that's nutrition, supplements, or exercise. Every single person is going to get their own program. And that's a whole nother reason why I get angry whenever I see all these hypothyroid diets or hypothyroid weight training programs or hypothyroid supplements to take, because I'm like, no, not every person is the same. Every single person has different genetics. They have different, like their genetics change, epigenetics based on their environment and everything they go through, the day-to-day life, and they have their own root cause. So it's hard to give like a specific program, but I like to start with what is going to be, I ask my clients, what is going to be doable for you?
I think that's the best answer you can give, and I kind of set you up to fail there. So I didn't do that intentionally, but you got the right answer, which is, hey, look, when somebody comes to see Dr. Erica, me, you, what we want to do is look at you individually. Lacey said it did a great job of that. There isn't a set exercise, there isn't a set diet. We got to look at you and say, we all have a framework of the general concepts that we want to take a look at somebody, or kind of our algorithm of what we need to look at and address. But there's not a specific diet that's perfect for everybody. There's not a specific supplement routine that's perfect for everybody. Everybody developed hypothyroidism, or a level of hypothyroidism, or somewhere on that hypothyroid spectrum, for different reasons. Their stressors are different. Everything is different. So we have to treat each person individually, regardless of whether they have hypothyroidism, high blood sugar, they're obese, or they're just trying to train. Everybody's going to need a program that's slightly unique to them, which I think is really important. I want to sneak in one last question before we go, because this is one that gets a lot of concern and I hear it a bit, and especially when I make some posts, some people comment on it, but there's a myth that fasting is detrimental to people with hypothyroidism. I say myth because I don't believe it's true for the most part, but again, it's unique to the individual, who can handle it, who cannot handle it. You're not gonna, if your brain and your body run on carbohydrates, going from a standard American diet to a time restricted eating tomorrow could be problematic. But where's your thought process on that? The connection between whether somebody who's got hypothyroidism can do time restricted eating.
I love time restricted eating. I love intermittent fasting. I think it could be so beneficial for a host of reasons: decreasing inflammation, allowing to combat oxidative stress, helping with blood sugar regulation. There's so many benefits, longevity. So I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting. Not everybody can do it, of course. A lot of women, they struggle with cortisol and they struggle with hormonal imbalances, and especially with people who have a history of hypothalamic amenorrhea, it's not a good thing to start. And that's why, of course, it's always person by person dependent, like what you're going to do. But overall, I'm definitely a huge fan of intermittent fasting, and I think it can be extremely beneficial for hypothyroid patients, as long as their root cause is not chronic high cortisol. Then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who have issues with the intermittent fasting or time restricted eating is that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
They've never been trained on how to do it, and so it's easy to skip breakfast, so I'm only going to eat lunch and dinner, but when I eat my lunch and dinner, I'm more snacking, and so they end up being in this huge calorie deficit. And so that in itself is going to be, it's not the fasting itself was bad, it was the fact that when you are eating, maybe you're not eating the right foods and you're not eating the amount of calories, so your body thinks essentially it's in starvation mode, so it's going into crisis mode, and that's a stressor on the body.
Yeah, and I would say for the vast majority of people that we're seeing that have chronic health issues, that have weight issues, that have hypothyroidism, their body's typically not, they're not, they're not efficient at fat mobilization and beta, what we call beta oxidation, burning fat appropriately. So the challenge becomes if you're a person who's a grazer, you eat 3 meals a day, plus you eat 2 snacks per day, and you say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to not eat, you're probably going to have some nasty side effects as a result of that. The best thing for somebody who's if you're considering time restricted eating, in my opinion, is that you start where you are. If you're a person who's eating 5 meals per day and you're eating breakfast and you're eating dinner and you're eating a snack, you start slowly reducing that window. Don't go from I eat 18 hours a day to now I only eat within a 6-hour time frame. You're probably not going to feel well. You're going to struggle. The best thing to do is really to start slowly inching that back, half hour at a time, if that's what it takes, so that you can manage it more effectively. But I will tell the listeners that it is a massively powerful tool to help work and reset their physiology, to get their blood sugar to regulate better, to get them to be able to burn fat more effectively, if it's done appropriately. So great tool. There are some concerns that if you fast, it actually increases reverse T3 or can increase the deactivation of your thyroid hormone. For people who say that and believe that, if time restricted eating is done appropriately, there can be a temporary deactivation of thyroid hormone, just like exercise can create a temporary deactivation of thyroid hormone. However, when your cells deactivate thyroid hormone T4 to reverse T3 and T3 to T2, there are these metabolites within that T2 family that actually can continue to upregulate beta oxidation and mitochondrial function. So it's not like you're turning the system off. The body has a backup plan. And so fasting may slow down some aspects of physiology, but it can continue to maintain fat burning, fat mobilization, and actually can support muscle building, muscle growth, and proliferation. So I wouldn't be overly concerned that if you fast, that's detrimental to your thyroid physiology if you do it and you do it appropriately, especially with the guidance of somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people too, they get scared that intermittent fasting is going to cause them to lose muscle mass, and that is just not the case. As long as you're getting adequate calories, you're not under eating, and you're getting adequate protein in your resistance training, then you're not going to lose any muscle mass.
Yeah, I think the big key comes down to satiety. And so what happens for a lot of people who have hypothyroidism, they're not getting the right signals to brain, whether they're leptin resistant or they're eating lots of small calories and never getting those satiety signals. And so the brain does think, hey, we're starving, and it makes those changes to physiology in the body. But if you're doing time restricted eating appropriately and you're eating good amount of food, good caloric load, and you're getting that satiety signal to the brain, I think that makes all the difference on how time restricted eating is going to impact you, or how fasting is going to impact you. So Lacey, I know you're a busy lady and you got stuff to do, so we'll wrap this one up. Can you give the listeners a little bit of information about where they can find you? I know you're a big person on the gram, right? And so you're there, but where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and what you do and potentially work with you? Where can they go?
Yeah, so the first place you can go is to my website. It is uplifit.org. My Instagram is @faithandfit. My goal is to give you guys the tools and the knowledge, education, encouragement to reach your goals and thrive in your day-to-day life, not just survive. Of course, I also am a crazy cat lady, so if you like cats, feel free to follow my stories because they are on there quite often. And then you can follow me on Twitter @Lacey A. Dunn. I am a huge fan of Twitter, especially if you are a nerd and you are into the new research in regards to anything into your health, whether it's adrenals, digestion, hormones, whatever it is. Twitter is where it's at to look at new published research articles, and I make sure to share them there too.
Awesome. I'll post all the information in the show notes. And Lacey, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you being on. We'll have to get you on again sometime in the future. And with that, we'll all say goodbye. And if you're a listener, please share the podcast with your friends and family. Also, go to wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. And I think they have a star system on most of those places. Is that right, Erica? Yeah, Lacey, you know that? And I think if you go to the rightmost star and you click that one, I think that's the one you're supposed to click when you rate our podcast, right? At least ours. Click that rightmost star and give us a review. All right. So ladies, thanks for another great podcast, and we'll all chat soon. Take care.
Yeah.